Hello everyone, good morning. This is Srinivas here. Welcome to today's session. Today we are going to discuss about web services automation using SOAP UI. Okay, let us start with this session. Okay, now first of all, let us start with web service. Introduction to web service. So, what is a web service? Okay, so basically, web services can be divided into two parts. So, one can be called as SOAP web services, and other can be called as REST-based web services. Okay, so SOAP is a protocol, simple object access protocol, and REST is the architecture. Okay, so now what is web service? So basically, web service is, in simple words, services made available over the network. Okay, so any service that is made available over the network can be called as web service. Now, having said that, website is for human consumption, whereas web service is for code or application level consumption. Okay, so now you may ask that there are many applications that are available over the internet which we use on a day-to-day basis, such as mailing, for mailing purposes, for e-commerce websites. We use shopping and other applications. We use a lot of applications for monitoring the temperature and other things of climate and other things. So for such things that are available, you may ask, is that a web service? Now, web service is, as I said, web service is mainly for code consumption or application level consumption. Okay, so website is not web service. Okay, so now let us understand that through example. Okay, so let us say that you are creating a you are going to create a method called as get products in your project. Okay, so let me write that here. You're creating this method, and this is a very good function. Let us say in Java you have written, and this function is capable of retrieving the products for your project work. Okay, so it is retrieving set of products. And let us assume that there are other modules in this project uh, internally available, and they communicate with your get products. Okay, so how it communicates with the get products? They communicate with the get products using simple Java method call, because they are available inside the project. Okay, now let us say that you are going to make this available to the end customer. Okay, let us say your end customer is in some other location, other geography, other network, and you want to basically in other geography, so you want to make it available. So for the customer end user to make it available, what you will do is you are going to so what you will do is you will create a front end application for it, so that end user will not bother about the internal implementation, or how it can be called. So you will create a front end using Dojo or other technology, and you will give the end user URL of it, and the end user will be able to access that URL, and using that URL, user can see all the list of products for his requirement. Okay, so this is how it is. So now let us say that you have one more friend in some other geographical location. Okay, and he is in some other geographical location and is not in your organization, he is in some other organization. And let's say he is building one app, he is building one application, and he is hosting that in his application server. Okay, so in his application server, and let us let us say he has developed this several components. Okay, so how do you there are so many components available here. Okay, so now let us say that this your friend has a requirement, and he asks you to give the method that you have developed related to get product. so that he can use that get products to display the list of products in his application. Then what will you do? You will you what you can do is one of the ways you may take this get product function and all the other related components, okay, and you will package it in the form of a jar file or something. Okay, so and that jar file you will give it to your friend. Okay, so this jar file is going to be packaged and built in his project. So your friend may take that jar file and he will include inside his project, and he will be able to use it. So will he be able to use this get products after that? He will not be able to use, because this get products may have dependency on the database that you may have been interacting with, and your friend may not have the connection to that database. So he may not be able to retrieve the set of products which he was expecting to get. So this is the first point. And second point could be is you are changing your get products often, and it could be that you have changed your get products to version 2.0. Okay, you have changed it to 2.0, uh, but uh, uh, but your friend will not be able to access it unless you again package it. You make a jar file and you give it to that friend. Then only you will be able to import it, and if he has that database component, then he can access then he can only access the get products. Okay, so but what would have been the best case is if your friend could have directly accessed the get products from your environment. Okay, so this would have been the ideal case if your friend could have directly made a call to the get products where you have made it available. Then all these dependencies are resolved. So how we can make this possible? So this can be made possible by using web services. Okay, so now we have seen why web services. Mainly you can use web services to access any method by making a direct call. Okay, so this is possible using web services. Okay, and one of the best part about web service is not technology dependent. So what that means is you can write a code in C++, and you can write a code in Java, and you can interact between C++ and Java using web services. So it could be any programming language for that matter. You can have your code written in one language, and you can have it configured with web service. Okay, now let's take the example. I have two uh, two projects. One is in C++. Let us say this is the old legacy platform in which it was developed, and let us say this is in Java. Okay, so now let us say you want to interact between these two. Okay, so how you can interact between these two is using web services, as I said. Okay, so how it is possible to interact between these two is we will discuss in detail about it. Basically, first thing what you need to do is you need to configure your code with web service here. Then the other programming language will be able to access the methods of that particular project. Okay, so so this is at high level. Now let us see in detail. Okay, so now let us take a hypothetical example of two people. One is a Russian guy and other is French person. Okay, so let us say that he is a Russian guy and he is a French person, and they want to communicate between each other. So they are culturally different. They don't have common language. They don't have common culture. Then how they can talk or how they can communicate between each other? So these two people can communicate between each other by having some standard set. Okay. So what are the standards that are required for these two people to communicate? Okay, so now let us discuss this. So there are few things that are required. So let me just list out that. So first is they require a medium for communication. Okay, so let us say that they are going to use telephone conversation. So they require telephone as the medium for them to communicate. Okay, so medium is required for them to communicate. Now let us say what is the language. Basically, for them to communicate, they need a common language, as understood. So, what can be the common language for them to converse? So, the common language can be English, because English is the standard across the globe. So, English can be the language. Now, again, even though if we say that it is English, but English in India is different from English in US, English in UK. So you have to specify again the format of English, what type of English you want to speak. So I'm going to say format, and I'm going to say it as, let us say, British English. Okay. So we are setting the standard. So British. So is it enough now that if you have a medium as telephone, language as English, and format as British English, is it enough for them to communicate? No. They require another important thing, that is telephone number. Using that, they will be able to talk. So I'll call that as address equal to telephone number. Okay. So how they will get to know about the telephone number? So this Russian guy may check the telephone directory, and by looking at the telephone directory, he may be finding the number of a French guy, and he will be using that telephone number, using telephone, using English as as the language, and format as the British English. They will be able to talk to each other. So this is hypothetical example how, two different people from different culture, different geography able to talk. Now let us take this to our web services. Now let us say there is a uh, there is a code which is written in C++, and there is a code which is written in Java. Now, how these two programming languages can talk to each other? C++ cannot understand what is written in Java, and Java's prototype or methods. Similarly, Java cannot understand what is written in C++. Okay, so now let us try to write all the standards for them to talk to each other. So again, first standard would be medium. Okay, so what can be the medium for these two programming languages to talk to each other? Okay, so medium I did not mean by physical medium. Here, medium will be the IP layer, that is HTTP protocol. So hypertext transfer protocol. So let us say using hypertext transfer protocol, these two programming languages can talk to each other. Okay, so now is only this HTTP medium is enough for them to talk, for these two programming languages to talk? No, it is not enough. They again require a common language between each other for them to talk, because C++ cannot understand Java, Java cannot understand C++. Okay, so I will say language equal to, so what is the common language? Common language can be free form XML language. So the XML language can be understood by C++ as well as Java, because it is free form, and in this you can have you can define your own set of tags also. So that is how you can define. But is it enough to have only language as XML, and then both these languages can talk to each other? No, there has to be some standard set in the XML. That is like particular tags and other things have to be set in the XML. Then only they will be able to talk. So it's a format. So what can be the format? Format can be SOAP. So SOAP is the Simple Object Access Protocol. So using this protocol, basically this is a standard. So using this standard, you can have your XML written in such a way that like envelope and body and other tags, such that these two programming languages will be able to understand. Okay, so that is the format. Okay, and now let us come to the last part, that is address. So what can be the address? Okay, so now whatever functions that you might have written in Java, let us say you have written function A, function B, function C, function D, like that, and this will not be understood by C++ directly. So what Java person will do, let us say that that Java developer is creating one document, and in that document he is giving the all the method that he has implemented, method or function details that he has implemented, and is also giving the signature of each method, like a method has signature x comma y, and also all those details is storing that, and this entire document is placing in server. Okay, let us say is placing in server, let us say this is the place, and is storing in server. Like this is in a across the globe, is placed in some global location. Similarly, other person who are developing some other application, they can also create such documents and they can register it here. So basically this is called as UDDI. Okay, so UDDI stands for Universal Description Definition Interface. Okay, so UDI is a very much very common term in web services. So UDDI is the place where all the documents which are created by the developers will be registered in a common place. So it is like a registry. And this document what the developer writes about the method and signatures is called as WSDL. WSDL stands for Web Service Definition Language. Okay, so now as we know that C++ cannot directly understand the methods of Java, what C++ can do is C++ program can contact UDDI and find out what is the registry document related to Java, that is the WSDL. Through WSDL, it will understand that, okay, there is a method called as in Java called as a, which has parameters x comma y. So then it can make direct call to Java via XML, that can be called as request, and it can get the response back from Java. Again, that can be called as response. Again, it's a XML document. Okay, so this is how two programming languages of different of different geography in different network, having different language altogether, they are able to talk to each other through medium HTTP. Language free from XML language, format is SOAP, and address is WSDL. Using WSDL, after contacting UDDI, it will be able to uh, uh, contact the particular Java language, and run the particular method and get the response back in the form of XML. So using XML, they can talk to each other. So this can be called as request, and this can be called as response. So this is how any of the two languages can talk to each other irrespective of the of knowing the internal implementations of what has been done inside. Okay, so this is the basic of web services. Now let us understand where web services are used. Okay, so now let us take that you might have heard about many of the websites these days that are offering services like hotel websites, uh, flight websites. So now let us take example of Make My Trip. So what Make My Trip do is Make My Trip do not have any airlines. Make My Trip is a simple website in which they have created web page mainly for the user to enter arrival date and departure date, And what make my trip does is, whenever user enters arrival date, departure date for the flights, to book the flights, make my trip will contact other airline websites like Jet Airways, okay, or Indigo, or any other airline website it will contact. So this contact is a web service call. So make my trip is going to uh, uh, contact to the particular airline through web services. Okay, so how make my trip knows that, okay, there is a web service for Indigo, there is a web service for Jet Airways through UDDI. So beforehand, what Make My Trip they would have done is they would have checked the UDDI registry, because each airline they would have registered their document. Like I'll say Indigo here, Indigo, and let us say this is Jet Airways, and this is SpiceJet. Okay, anything. Okay, so they would have registered their web services, that document in UDDI. So as we discussed earlier, UDDI, so Universal Description Definition Language. So here they would have registered. So Make My Trip knows about that registration. So what Make My Trip does is, Make My Trip has come to UDDI and collected the WSDL, found what is WSDL for each of the airlines. So whenever user enters the arrival date and departure date, so it will send the request to the respective it will send a request to all the airlines, and all airlines gives the response back in the form of XML with the flight numbers. Like these are the flight numbers and this is flight timing. So that flight timing and flight numbers will be displayed in Make My Trip website. So this is how it will work. So this same concept can be applicable to any of the other hotel websites like Trivago or anything that you see. Like, or Just Dial. So what they do is they in turn have the web service call to some other web service providers, and they will give you the response back. So now another example for this is, whenever you are working on internet, you might have seen that you are working on new web page or something, and it asks you for the authentication, and they will say that you can either register to this website, or you can log in using Google, or you can log in using Facebook. So again, here what they're doing is they are going to authenticate using the web service of authentication web service using Facebook or Google. So again, it will have web service call to the through Facebook or Google, and it will do the authentication, and it will get the response back saying whether that authentication was successful or not successful. So accordingly, it will allow you to continue further in that website. Okay, so this is about web service, and now we understood where web services are used. Okay, so now in general, so whatever we have discussed so far, so we have discussed, let me just list them all. So we have discussed request. Basically, the request is sent by the client side to the server, and response is the response XML that we get from the server back to the client. That is the response in the form of XML. XML. So XML is the free form language that we discussed, because it provides user to create any tags, and user can customize it according to their requirement. Okay, and then we have seen SOAP is the format, that is Simple Object Access Protocol, that is used, and UDDI we have discussed, that is the registry place, and we have discussed WSDL, that is Web Service Definition Language, where developers basically write the method signatures in the form of document, that is WSDL, and all the things happen over medium called as internet, HTTP. So this can be called as overall this can be called as web service. Okay, I think now you have understood what exactly is web service, and why web service, how web service is implemented, and where web service can be used. Okay, now there is another term related to web services. We'll see that you might have heard about SOA. So in many project, uh, you might have heard about SOA. SOA stands for Service Oriented Architecture. So what is the meaning of service oriented architecture is you have a project in which there are many modules created, and those modules interact between each other using web services. Okay, so in the architecture level it may have interaction between each other using web services, and there are other components like ESB and so on. So this overall architecture in which two or many modules which are implemented talk to each other using services is called as service oriented architecture. So gone are the days when there was a object oriented architecture where objects used to talk to each other. You send one object and you get the object back. So nowadays it is more about service oriented architecture. So why service oriented architecture is because, as we discussed, so it can be independent of technology implemented. So you can have one module implemented in some other technology, and you can have one more module implemented in other technology, and they still can talk to each other through web services. Okay, so now in service oriented architecture, web service is one of the implementation. Okay, so like this there are many other ways or many other technologies which you can use to implement service oriented architecture, like MSDCOM, RMI, remote method invocation, or you can use uh, Corba call. So like this, there are many other implementation. Web service is somewhat famous and familiar for us to work on. Okay, so with this background, now let us move on to the next part. So that is, we will understand one web service. We will see how it can be automated using SOAP UI. Okay, so SOAP UI is from Smart Bear Corporation. SOAP UI tool is developed by Smart Bear Corporation. SOAP UI comes in two flavors. One can be called as SOAP UI open source, and other can be called as SOAP UI Pro. SOAP UI Pro is licensed version. SOAP UI open source can be accessed for free usage. So now, as part of today's session, we will see the licensed version, and licensed version of SOAP Pro is also called as Ready API. So under Ready API, uh, but this is licensed. So under this, there are many other components that are supported. So we'll see at high level, and then we will see how we can use Ready API for automating web service today. Okay, so as part of Ready API package provided by SmartBear, it provides SOAP UI for functional testing, secure tool for security testing, load UI for load testing, and service V for services, mainly for virtualization of services. Okay, so it provides all that. So this entire package can be called as Ready API. Okay, so as part of today's session, we are going to see SOAP UI, and we will understand how we can import WSDL in this tool, and how we can automate it. Now let us take for example, we have a WSDL, that is calculator WSDL. It provides functionality like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Okay, so now this is the WSDL. So WSDL, we have discussed what is WSDL. So we will see how we can import this WSDL. So I'll just copy this WSDL, and I'll come to projects tab, and I'm going to create a new project. I'll say file. Okay, so I'm coming to SOAP Pro, and here I can say that create a test from an API definition. I'll say start. So this is create a test from a URL that is for the REST based architecture. So that maybe we can see in the future sessions. So now we'll see create a test from an API definition. So I'll just start, and it will ask for the file path. So here I can give WSDL, and you can see that what are the supported formats. It has the WSDL, WADL, Swagger, and OS. Maybe in the future sessions we'll discuss about other terms like WADL, Swagger, and all those things. So I'll say next, and now I'm going to say I want to create a single test case. I'll say select, and I'll say finish. Okay, so I'll close this window. So now we can see that it has created a project and it has imported the WSDL, and there are two mainly there are two flavors of methods, that is calculator soap 1 2 and calculator soap. And in calculator soap there is a method called as add, there is a method called as divide, multiply, and subtract. So to test add, you can simply pass the parameters in the form editor. So in SoapUI Pro, they provide many options. So if you come to SoapUI open source, there won't be any form view or outline view. So these two views are additional views provided in SoapUI Pro. So because it makes easier for you to read the format of XML, you can directly provide the input to the parameters. Like for example, I want to test this particular method, that is add. So I have given the parameter input and then click on play button. So it is going to submit the request and it is going to give the response back. You can see here the response is the 9, it is with the 9 value. Okay, so this is manual testing. So many of the projects use SOAP UI open source or ready API for manual testing also. So to test SOAP based web services or REST based web services, they use it for manual testing. And now how do you automate it? So we'll see that in a while. So to automate it, basically you have to have set of test cases. Like you will have test cases like, okay, for this particular test case, pass this input parameter, this input parameter, and this should be the output value, or this should be the particular response that has to be retrieved, and things like that. So there will be many scenarios. Okay, so now let us say that for this particular data that we are given 4 and 5, let's say we want to convert this to a test case, automation test case. So simply you can say in ready API you can say add this request to test case, and you can give the test case I'll say create a new test case, and I'll say okay, and this is test case 2. And here it is adding the request, add request, it is going to add, and like this it has created one test case. And you might have noticed one thing, whenever I was creating that project, when I was importing the WSDL, by default it was asking whether you want to have single test case or multiple test cases. So uh, so at that time I selected single test case. So by default, it has created one test case for us. So I'll just remove that step for now because it will confuse. So we are going to have one test case, that is test case 2. I'll just rename it to test case 1. Okay, yeah. So now we can see the hierarchy uh, of the project. So that is starting from project is the top level, then comes the project suite, then comes test case, then comes the particular request. So these are the different levels, and you can run your test case at any level. You can run at test case level, you can run at suite level, or you can run at project level. Okay, so now for this test case that you have created as part of automation, now let me just play it. So as part of automation, you might have some expectation. You want to verify some of the things in the response XML. So that is for the input 4 and 5. You want to verify that count is 9. So you can say right click. So how do you add the verification points? You can say right click and you can say add assertion, and you can say add assertion for count. So this will verify that count is 9. So when I say add assertion for count, automatically it has created XPath expression and it is uh, giving the value. So one second, let me just redo it. I'll say right click and I'll say add as assertion for content, because here let's say you want to verify output is 9. So you are going to verify, so it will create automatically, it will create XPath for you. This is in SOAP UI Pro, but if it is SOAP UI open source, you need to write this XPath yourself, and then you need to add it for the verification. So I'll save. Before save, you can use wildcard expression. So if you want to verify it contains some value, then only you want to pass it. So those things you can do it. You can use ignore namespaces. You can say ignore XML comments. So as of now, I'll say 9 is my expected value, 9. So now like this, so you can see that now there are two verification. One verification is default verification that is added to any test case. So default verification is, it is checking that there is a proper SOAP response coming. Proper SOAP response meaning it has SOAP envelope, it has SOAP body. So it checks that, only that. And now next verification that we have added is assertion. That we have added is to check the output is 9 for the input response input request that you have passed. And now let's say that you want to verify, there is a node called as add result. So how do you verify that? You can say add assertion, and you can say add assertion for existence. So when you say add assertion for existence, it will verify whether add result is present or not. Okay, so I'll say save. So like this, you can add any number of verification points. Okay, so now after you have added all the verifications required for the test case, you can run that at any level, as I said. So now let us run at test case level. When I say play, it will run, and it is giving the result as pass. And if I click on transaction log, I can see what exactly happened. So I can see that it was run at 10:08, and overall it took 615 millisecond. And when I open, I can see what was the uh, raw XML that was passed during the run, and what was the raw XML that was retrieved during the run. Okay, and if you are a API tester, you would know that for valid OK responses, the code will be 200. HTTP code will be 200. So this also can be verified. So how we can verify that is, we can come back to the test case. I'll come back to my test case, and here I can say assertion, and you can add assertion here also. You can say add an assertion. I'll say click, and you can say compliance. So if you use compliance, you can see that there are many verifications that are available. Okay, so here I can say valid HTTP status code. So this will check the status code. So here, what is the status code we want to verify? We want to verify 200. I'll just give 200. Okay, 200, and I'll say okay. And let's say, yeah, we can see it is green. And let's say that you are verifying for 500 in some cases. Okay, so let's say you are verifying for 500, and if your current response is not matching 500, you will see that failed immediately. Okay, so I'll change it back to 200. Okay, so this is how you can automate any test case for that matter. It could be in WSDL, or it could be based on REST architecture. You can import the endpoint, and you can add it to the test case, and then you can verify the responses by adding respective assertions. Okay, so now as part of this session, let us go further, and let us say that we want to data drive this test. Let us say as part of your test case, you have different input combinations and different output combinations that you want to verify. Okay, so for that, let me create an Excel sheet, and let me define the inputs. So what are the inputs I expect? I'll say input to 1, and I'll call it as input 2. And what is the output, or what is the expected we are going to expect? So input, let us say that you're going to have 4 as the input, you are going to pass 6 as the one more input, and you expect 10 to be there in the output as part of addition, right? So like this, let us define few more inputs. I'll say 3 comma 3, and we'll have 6, and let's say 5 comma 4, and then we'll have 9, and let's say that 1 comma 7 as output 8. Okay, and let's say that for the last input what I will do is I'll give 4 comma 4, and I'll give wrongly 3 as the expected. Let us see what happens. And for this XLS, I'll save it, save this Excel, I'll save it in the desktop, and I'm going to call that as data1 dot xls, data1, save. Okay, so as part of Pro provides you to data drive to XLS or any other data source options like database and so on directly. But if it is open source, you need to write the code to connect to the Excel sheet or any other data source option that you have. Okay, so this is the best part of Ready API. So today we are going to see as part of Ready API. Maybe in the future sessions we can see how SOAP open source also can be used for data driving purposes using code. So in that case, you may have to write the Groovy script code. Okay. So now let us we are going to add data driven steps. Let us create one more test case for that purpose. So I'll say add. I'll select add here, and I'll give here, okay, and I'm going to call that as test case 2 for data driving purposes. Let's say, okay. And now in this test case, we are going to add data driven steps. So let us say right click on the test case and select add step. So in this you can see there are many steps that are available. This can be explored. Okay, so as part of today's learning, we are going to learn how we can use data driven testing in Ready API. So you can use data source option. So in data source, I'll give name as data source, and I will say no, and here I am going to select data source. Select, yeah, as I said, it supports various data source options starting from data generation, data generator, Excel, file, grid, Groovy, JDBC, JSON, and XML. So today we'll learn about Excel. So you can we can import Excel. So here I'll give Excel sheet as the input, and for this I'll say yes, I want to import the property starting from sheet 1, right? Sheet 1. Okay, so we can see that it has imported properties input 1, input 2, and expected. And our verification is going to start from our data is available from row number 2, because row number 1 is the header, and we can just import this data and test whether it is imported successfully or not. Okay, so to do that you can use this option import. One second, so you can just use this option play, and it will give you the output imported from Excel sheet into the Ready API. We can see that output here. Okay, just to confirm whether it is coming properly or not. Now we are going to use this data source that we want to give as input to here. Okay, so before that, let us add some verifications here. For this, we want to verify add assertion like as we did before. Add assertion for content. I'll say save. Okay, I think that verification is enough for us. And then this is the hard coded value. Now, okay, data source, I'll move it above the SOAP request, and in the add request, this two, we want to replace it with the value that is coming from data source. So how we can do that is right click and get data. This is called as point and click testing. You can simply point and you can select particular data that you want to get. So I can say test case data source I want to get, and I want to map it to input 1 from the data source. I'll say add. Similarly, I will say for number 2 input, I'll say get data, and here I'm going to say data source input 2, and I'll say add. So like this, now we can see that earlier it was having some hard coded value 2 and 2. Now it got replaced with the code that is the dollar sign open flower bracket data source hash input 1. So this basically gets the data from the data source input 1 column. Similarly, input 2 column. Similarly, for the verification that we have here, uh, let us come back to that verification. So here even this value has to be retrieved from data source what we are expecting. So again, we will do the same thing. You can say right click, you can say get data, and you can say data source, and you can say expected, and then you can say add. So this way again it has replaced the hard coded value with the expected value that will be retrieved from data source, and then I can say save. So like this now we can see that it has just ignore the failure for now because we are going to run it in iterations. So this way we have added to the request and also to the verification we have added. So now we want to run it for all the iterations. To run it for all iterations, there is one more option in Ready API that is called as data source loop. So we need to add data source loop, and let us click on this test case, and let us select the data source loop. So here we need to select uh, what you want to loop with. You want to loop with the data source, and what is your target step? Our target step is add request, right? So for every iteration you want to change the add request data and you want to continue. Okay, so I'll just uncheck this, that is discard successful test results within the loop to save memory. I have unchecked that so that we see all the results. Then I click on OK. Now you can see that the change in arrow mark, basically it is saying it is going to add request and it is going to continue in the loop. Now let us say we want to run this test case for all the iterations. So simply you click on run, and you can see that it is running for all the iterations and it has completed the run. Now let us click on transaction log, and when you click on transaction log you will see that it has run for all the iterations, and here we see that it has run for uh, first 4 iteration with successful result, that is the data uh, row 4, whereas for the last iteration it has failed. Why it has failed? Because if you remember, I have given 4 comma 4 and output as 3, so expected result did not match, so it got failed. So I can open this to check why it got failed. You can open this and you can check here what was the raw XML that you passed 4 comma 4, and what was the raw XML that you retrieved. You retrieved with 8 output, but in the what we gave in the expected result, we gave 3 as the expected value. That is why our test case got failed. Okay, so this way you can find out for the data driven step that you have added, whichever step is failed. Just come to the failure, open that failure, check the transaction log, and then you can check the particular request that was retrieved during the run, and what was the request that was passed, and response that was retrieved, and you can check why exactly it is failed. Okay, so one more thing is you can filter your results. Now let me just rerun, and you can filter your results by failure so that you directly come to the failure. Okay, now after doing all this, you want to report this to the management or to the team lead. So there is an option for the report. You can choose report, and now let us say you want to get a test case printable report. Again, this reporting option is not available in SoapUI open source. This reporting is only provided in Ready API. So using this, it will create the report. Let us create a report and see the output. Okay, we can see that it has generated PDF format of report. It is saying what is the test suite that was run. So basically this is for the what is the test case that was run, and what is the number of assertions that are available. Now let us see the other part of it. Okay, in page 3 it is showing what is the result for each and every test case, and it is saying that there was one test step that was failed with respect to the expected result, that is not matching. It is saying expected value 3 and actual value is 8. And also if you look further, it will give you the request and response XML of the failure. So this way it would be easy for you to debug. Suppose there was a failure happened, you just have the report opened and check what was the raw XML that was passed in the report, and what is the response that you have received. So this way it would be easy for you to debug. Okay, so I think that's all I have from my side. So let us quickly recap what we have discussed. We have discussed the basics of web services, why web services, how web services are implemented, and where web services are used. Then we have discussed about Ready API tool, how we can use Ready API tool to import WSDL, and how we can create a test case, how we can manually test it, and also how it can be automated using various suggestions that are available. And finally, we have seen how we can use data source feature and data source loop feature to loop your tests and get the data from the Excel sheet. Okay, so that's all I have. I hope this session has been useful. Thank you everyone. See you in the next session.